You're listening to the Unsure Entrepreneur Podcast with Roger Pierce. Whether you're scribbling business ideas on a napkin or wrestling with the should I, shouldn't I question, get ready to explore the realities, the risks, and the rewards of entrepreneurship as we share the stories, scars, and successes of small business owners.
Today, I'm thrilled to have Rachel Ott, the principal of Varga Girl Design, joining us. Based in Toronto, Rachel's design studio has been carving out a significant niche in visual and technical design solutions for over 2 decades. Recognized as the top Canadian B2B design firm by Clutch.co, Rachel and her team at Varga Girl Design have helped shape the visual identities of many, many, many businesses, providing the indispensable value of great design, attention to detail, and super fast service. I know all these things to be true because Rachel is my design partner and handles all of my design projects, including the cover art design for this very podcast. And I'm proud to call her a good friend. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, happy to be here.
So good to have you here. And, we're going to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got started and really poke and prod a bit into what you like about entrepreneurship and what you don't like. But first, to give a little context, aside from my bio there, can you give me some insights into what you do and who you serve?
Yeah, so I would say I'm a little bit of a rare bird because I've got such a varied background in print and web and design and branding. And, I can get into more detail about that. But I do all kinds of design. I do corporate fussy design. I do independent solopreneurs design. I do all kinds of stuff. I mean, the only thing I really don't do is illustration. Other than that, I do trade show materials. I do PowerPoints. I do annual reports. I do websites. I do product packaging. I do all kinds of stuff. So I am sort of your one-stop shop, I guess.
And you do it so very, very well. One of the things I love working with you is you take careful notes, you pay attention to detail, you really listen to what the client wants. I know you also aren't afraid to stand up and tell the client when they're wrong, but we'll get to that later. Speak truth to power, but you really do. You listen to what the client wants. You're very detailed. You provide a detailed quote and an estimate, so everything's above the board, very professional. Because a lot of designers out there, it gets kind of vague and there's project ranges, but you're very clear about it, which I love. And then, you always wow me with the fantastic design elements and things I could never express or think about. And you come up with these solutions for me. And I just trust what you do implicitly. And whenever you have a problem, or whenever I've had a problem in terms of design or layout or something, you're always able to solve it. So
I love hearing it. I design for the client. I really do. And a good example of that is I had a client recently I was creating an appeal letter for with my writing partner. And she asked if we could design something a little bit ugly because she felt that when you get those appeal letters in the mail, it's a little bit more of a pull on the heartstrings if it's a little ramshackle, a little grassroots looking. And I don't design, although I have won awards. That's not what's going on in the back of my mind when I design. I want to make the client happy. So, they used Arial for the font. And I made this thing look ugly is probably too strong a word, but it wasn't as polished as I would have done for myself. The client was really happy, and it was a very successful campaign. So I design for the client. I always have the client in mind.
You mentioned winning awards. Tell me more about Clutch and what that means to people who don't know.
Clutch is a really strong marketing tool for me because it is basically based on the reviews from your clients. They're not the kind of thing that you could just have a client go online and type out a few words. They are interviewed by Clutch I don't know, what is it, a 20-minute, 30-minute call? And it means a lot to me, first of all, that a client would take that kind of time out of their own schedule, which is probably busy, for 30 minutes. And then on top of that, to be really honest and truthful about their experience. So I have a good rating with Clutch. I'm one of their top designers, and I'm really proud of that. And on top of that, I'm also proud to say that I've won some international design awards. In 2023, I won for packaging design, for branding, for marketing. And I just learned a couple weeks ago that the packaging design for non-alcoholic beer in the US that I did has won a New York award, design award, which is an international award, and we won silver. So couldn't be more proud of that.
Tell me more about that campaign if you can share details. I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it was great. So I had a client who found me through Clutch, actually, who is down in Florida, a lovely, lovely woman, entrepreneur. She just had started this idea of a non-alcoholic malt beverage. We talked a little bit. I always start by creating a mood board so I can kind of anticipate the flavor of kind of the design that she might like. And we quickly came to an agreement of which we thought was the strongest. I designed the branding, the logo, the packaging, the website. So it was fantastic, as well as like marketing materials to go with it. She was just a pleasure to work with. Just so you know, I'll give her a plug. The beer is called Devoted. And it's sort of based on that idea that we have a certain amount of responsibility to honor our bodies and be healthy and that kind of thing. And it was fantastic. And I'm really proud of the final result. So
Is there a sample on your website of this campaign?
not yet, but I think if you go to drinkdevoted.com, you can see the results.
You know, this is something I want to expand on too, because here we have you, an expert in visual graphic design. I'm a words guy. I can't put two pictures together to save my life. But what is the importance of the role of visual identity and good branding for a small business? How important is that to their success?
Oh, it's so important. It's the thing that represents you when you're not there in person to represent yourself. It's sort of the unspoken salesperson. And I think I've personally bought products just based on the branding or the packaging. And I really think you can be good at a lot of things in business. You can be a great business person. Doesn't mean you're great at branding. So hire a professional. And you're also, frankly, you're too close to it to really see it. Like I have a good example of a client years ago created a machine that would print a label that you could attach to your bottle of wine that talked a little bit about the vintage and, pairing notes and stuff. And he put a picture of a bottle of wine on the label. And I said to him, now, why would you do that? You're putting it on a bottle of wine. Happy birthday or congratulations, or like give the user options that will be like, oh my goodness, I don't have a gift. I'm going to run to the LCBO, grab a bottle and a label that says happy birthday, done, right? He couldn't see that though. He couldn't see the bottle of wine was just redundant because he's too close. He's right in the forest. He doesn't see the trees.
And you know what? In terms of standing out too and competitiveness, it's absolutely crucial. That's an advantage small business owners need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And every advantage you can get.
Yeah, because we don't have a big bucket full of money like bigger companies. We need all these advantages. So investing in good design is a competitive advantage, a strength, isn't it?
Sure, of course. It's how you communicate. So you want to make everything as clear as possible, right? There are websites you can go to where I still don't know what the people do because it's just filled with marketing speak or whatever it is. That's your responsibility as a business owner. If you can't communicate it, then hire somebody that can.
So true. And what do you say? And I know your prices are always very reasonable, and often I'm surprised at how affordable things are to get designed up or laid out. But what do you say to an entrepreneur who says, "Oh no, my brother Bill is pretty good in Photoshop. He can probably put together my logo." What do you say to people like that?
Well, I mean, look, it can be very expensive to make cheap decisions sometimes. I've had many clients come to me to redo something that was done on the cheap. And then where are you? Yeah, spend the money, invest. Because you got to live with it for a long time too. So you better love it. The other thing is when I'm creating branding for somebody, I keep going. And if it takes, God forbid, but sometimes it takes, 30 iterations before we get there, then it takes 30 iterations, right? I mean, I work until it's loved.
Work until it's loved. I do a lot of my business is words primarily. So we, same kind of thread. We keep editing until the client is happy. And that can make many, many iterations too. What you said earlier was so important. This is your identity to the world. You got to love it. You got to be proud of it. It's going to help you get out there and achieve sales because you feel good about this new look, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're creeping on other people's branding, if you're looking at your competitors and jealous of what they've got, well, then that's no good.
Can you give us an insight into, take a logo, for example. What are some simple things people should remember when they're assessing or considering a logo? Like, I don't want to get too specific about colors. I know that's on a case by case basis, but is it ideal to use maybe 2 colors max as opposed to 4 colors? Is it better to use 1 or 2 elements rather than 4?
Oh, you can't really have hard and fast rules, but I will say this: the designing a logo now is so different than it was, say, even 10 years ago, because you're going to need, probably like an avatar. You're going to need 20 different versions of this logo: square, long, vertical. You've got print, you've got online, you've got low res, high res, you have black and white, you've got a million different versions, and it has to be super flexible. So, what you're really looking for is, first of all, when you get your logo, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking from anybody, there better be some branding guidelines to go with it so that you know exactly how to use it. And you can send it to your brother-in-law who's building your Wix website, and he can follow the branding guidelines and make sure that it's adhering to those principles. Because when I'm designing, I always want to put it into context. So I always liken it to, if you were selling your house, you wouldn't just sell it empty. You'd stage it. You'd put a family room together. You'd put a crib in one of the rooms. It's the same for me when I'm designing a logo. I will show you, this is how it's going to look like in print, and this is how it's going to look burned into the wood of the shed that you're building, or whatever it is that, whatever context makes sense. And that's really important. So it's really about flexibility. If you are designing, you have to have that flexibility in mind and how it's going to work out.
Great tips. I remember one piece of advice, and if it still applies, look at the logo draft in the smallest possible form, the business card size, right? Tiny, tiny. And if it still looks good and makes sense, that's a good sign, right?
Yeah. And in the guidelines, I mean, for instance, I'll have a logo that has a tag built in, but then at a certain size, you have to lose the tag. And then maybe at a certain size, it gets cut into 2 lines or something like that. But all those things are really important. I will say this: I think one of the advantages that I offer as well is that, to me, you're a really valued client. And all my clients are, even the clients that maybe are smaller, they mean a lot to me because that's my bread and butter. If you were going to an agency, if you're going to some huge advertising agency, they'd put the junior on that account. It would be very like, ugh, that guy's only spending X number of dollars. So they don't prioritize him, right? For me, it's like I'm giving you the wealth of my experience, but the price point is more modest. And the customer service, I kind of built a business model on over delivering on like my people pleaser personality. so, so that I'm usually very quick to respond. And, like I said, I work until it's right.
You certainly do. And maybe that's a good segue into your slogan. You can explain what that means. Pretty powerful.
Right. And I can't even take credit. I will give this to my husband. He came up with it. But so Varga Girl Design, I'll explain it really quickly because no one understands what it means. Alberto Vargas was an illustrator, and in the 40s, he had a contract with Esquire magazine. And he did those illustrations of the women, like the very beautiful 40s kind of models. They're very sexy, right? They called them Varga girls because his last name was Vargas. So it's a bit of a tribute to that timepiece because in the 40s, that's when women were entering the workforce because of the Second World War. So they were gaining this independence that they'd never had, which I love. Also, it was a time where women were really celebrated, curvy, beautiful women. And it's a little bit of a tribute to my dad, who was a fighter pilot. And they used to paint these, not that he fought in the Second World War, he was, not born yet, but they used to paint them on the side of planes, right? So it's a little bit of a nod to him. So the idea is that you can still celebrate beauty and power and independence and all those things. And it's all kind of rolled into one. And that's sort of my company ethos. And that's kind of mine as well, I guess.
Now, let's look at your personal startup story. I'm fascinated to hear because I know you've been at this for a long time, but think back to the early stages. Tell us how you got into this crazy life.
Yeah. So I think, like I was saying before, I am a bit of a rare bird because I came to Toronto to do graphic design. I studied at George Brown. And when I graduated, it was a recession. And somebody said to me, maybe you could get a job at a printing company and you'd learn a lot. And, it's a great way to kind of get your toe in the water. And so I did. I got a job at the largest downtown printing company at the time. They actually said to me, and this is funny because I'm Gen X, and this is kind of a typical Gen X story. My first day of work, my boss said to me, "We're going to treat you like crap. We're going to pay you crap, but this will be an invaluable lesson for you." And I thought, okay. And they were true to their word. It was very rough, but I learned the foundations of printing. I really learned so much. I mean, it was incredible. And then from there, I went on to work at some design studios and agencies where I really learned about great design and what separates average design from something really powerful, and typography and kerning and like finessey things that not every designer knows. I sometimes walk down the street and cringe because I I look at the kerning, or I go, that's not an apostrophe, that's a footmark. But anyway, eventually I got a job at a web company, like a web app development company, right at the top part of the web bubble, if you know what I mean. I think there's probably some younger listeners who are confused now, but in the sort of 2000 era, internet was huge and companies were just exploding. So I was the art director of this web company, and the dot-com bubble burst, and they said, well, everyone, we're going to stay open, but we can't afford the rent. So you go home and work from home. And that was at a time. I mean, now that seems normal, but back then it was not. It was very unusual. And my first thought was, oh, this is perfect, because I've got 10 years now under my belt of doing all these different kinds of work. And I knew that I could take that and leverage it and start my own thing. And then I already had a first client. I had this client that was going to be paying me to work from home. It wasn't long before that kind of fell apart and they were no longer able to pay me, but I just continued going. So this is where I set the record straight from the Pat McCauley podcast interview. I was a hot commodity, even though the dot-com bubble had burst. I really was a hot commodity. I was being wooed. I was being sought after, but I had decided I was going to do my own thing. The rumors are, according to Pat, oh, Rachel had no choice, so she started her. No, 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 no. I had many choices. I made the decision to start my own company.
For those of you wondering what we're talking about, Patrick McCauley was my guest on a previous podcast and is Rachel's husband.
And roll the tape. Let's roll the tape.
Roll the tape. I'm glad you clarified that.
Yes.
So, I mean, talk about that too. Born, not made for this life. You mentioned that to me earlier. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Like, I think I always had a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. And I shared this story with you personally once about my father was in the military and he had to have his boots polished. And I was very young. I was 8, maybe. I said to him, okay, I got this. I bought the supplies to polish his boots and I put them in a box and I wrote on the box, the Rachel Ott Independent Shoe Shine Company. And then I came up with the slogan, we've taken a shine to your shoes. And I wrote that on the box. And then he paid me $1 a boot. And, I always had, I think, spirit. I always I think part of it is you're always sort of thinking outside of the box. But at the same time, I've always been an open book. I wear my heart on my sleeve. That doesn't really translate that well to working for other people because I'm an eye roller. you know, I'm one of those people. And I also will work incredibly hard, but I expect a little bit of flexibility. And I think the world is different now, too. When I started Varga Girl in 2001, there wasn't that kind of flexibility. They expected you to punch a clock. And I'm not a clock puncher. I've always had that, I think, sort of a little bit of an attitude, a little bit of an edge, and then maybe a little bit of confidence that I could pull it off somehow.
You said so many wise things there, and it really is important for an aspiring entrepreneur to self-assess, right? What person they are, how they like to work, as you just said. I don't like to punch a clock, and that's all part of the equation about going into the decision of whether or not to become an entrepreneur. If you think you like the work routine and the security and the 9 to 5, then God bless you. Go go keep that job. But if there's something not quite fit, if you feel like you're a bit of a round peg in a square hole, then maybe you should look at entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a quote I heard once, like I don't know who I can attribute it to, but they said the definition of an entrepreneur is someone who will work 18-hour days so that they don't have to work 8 hours for someone else. And I think that's me too.
Oh man, I know you're working weekends and evenings. I'm going to lead you up to the question. Hope you give the right answer. But how do you achieve work-life balance, Rachel? What do you love to do in your downtime?
Well, that is the challenge, and it is not easy. And especially if you work from home, we did have an office up until COVID. We got rid of the office, and that makes it even harder because the desk is right there. It's right there calling to you. And you think, I'll just hop on here and take care of a couple things. But it's hard. I would recommend getting a hobby. And I had to sit down one day and think, what can I do? What can I do that's not work? Because I had friends doing theater and playing in bands. And I thought, yeah, I need something. It cannot just be work all the time. So I took up the drums. I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. That was life changing. It became my favorite thing. And I literally cannot think about work when I'm drumming. You can't think about anything but drumming when you're drumming. And then the second thing is the dog, right? Having a dog. Boy, you can have an important deadline, but when your dog needs to go, your dog needs to go, right?
Automatic walks built in.
Yeah, for sure. Get yourself outside.
That's so important. And, you got to have that balance. It's tough. Entrepreneurs will burn out. That's a serious risk
Oh, big time.
for small business owners. So I'm glad to hear you've got some outlets. The other thing you said to me, too, I want you to expand upon people can be haters. What did you mean by that?
I love this. And it took me years to learn this because I'm one of those people who will lie in bed and think about a mistake I made 15 years ago and go, how could I have missed that? How could I? Oh my God. But what I learned is every entrepreneur that I know, and not even just entrepreneur, but every person that I know that is successful and smart, people I really admire and look up to. And I just think, wow, you've really got your shit together. Like people that are really impressive. All of them have somebody out there that thinks they're a moron because it's just not always going to be right. It's not always going to be a perfect fit, or mistakes happen. Sometimes mistakes happen, or whatever. I mean, we've all lied in bed and thought, why did I say that? Oh, what was I thinking? We can't be haunted by this stuff because that's just life. And it's kind of a numbers game too. If you're doing a career for 30 years, there's going to be a few missteps. That's okay. You can't define yourself by your worst mistake. You have to keep going and learn from it.
Learn from your mistakes, but also, Rachel, give yourself some credit for all you've achieved and let some things go.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You can't worry about
Yeah.
that mistake 15 years ago.
Yeah. And some people are better than that at others. I guess I'm in the category of I dwell on things, but I am a woman. So
You're very particular to detail, and I can understand how something from the past would bother you in all fairness. I think going into a new business, and this podcast is for new entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs, how do you define success? I mean, especially now as you've achieved so much of it, look at all your clutch awards and recognition, international clients, but how would you define success, help an entrepreneur define their success and what kind of goals they should go for?
I think that's a really personal question too, because for some it might be money, and for others it might be just mastering a certain craft. Or, for instance, you could be a plasterer. That's an art. Those guys or women who dedicate their lives to perfecting that. I mean, it's incredible. Something I could never do. So, I mean, it really just depends. But I think for me, I've started to feel only recently, really, but that I've achieved a certain level of success because I don't have to chase clients. They come to me, which is great, and I can turn them down if I feel like it's not a good fit, which is also a privilege because you do want to work with people that you're sort of aligned with on different things. And I make enough money that I can go out to dinner and I can have a dog and that kind of thing.
Play the drum.
Yeah, play the drums, take drum lessons. I don't need to live in a mansion. I'm a pretty modest person, but I think that I do like to have, niceties, right? And if money's a struggle every month, and it was for a long time, that's stressful. So it's great that you can get to a point where maybe that's less of an issue.
I'm so glad you're in that position now. And picking on a little piece of nugget that you said a minute ago, turn down clients. Now, a lot of new entrepreneurs are very nervous about that. Can you expand on it? I know it's because you've been in business for so long, you've got lots of work to choose from, but it's also important for new entrepreneurs to carefully consider about who they're working with.
Oh my God, it's so true. And your gut is always right. It's always right. I've had clients where I could smell the crazy and I go, well, I need the money, I need the client, and I take on the project and it doesn't work out. And I just think, why didn't I listen? I should have listened to myself. Your gut is always right. Hopefully, at the beginning, you have an opportunity to be a little bit careful about who you're working with. I know it's harder when you're struggling, and people could take advantage of that too, which is unfair, where they go, I know you need the business, so I want a 50% discount or whatever it is, right? Yeah, you got to be true to yourself. Don't undersell yourself. That just cheapens everything. Just stick to your guns, get good at what you're doing. It's okay to discount yourself once in a while, but I think you have to try to really be true to your core values and how you're feeling about things. I mean, there's certain clients, I know Patrick talked about this too. Certain clients we're not going to work for. And I'm not going to work for tobacco, or I'm not going to, there's certain things that I just personally, it's not, no judgment, but certain things I'm not going to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one of the joys of self-employment. You can pick and choose who you want to work with. Right? I mean, in a job, they tell you what to do, where to go, what hours you'll keep, and your customers are the employer's customers. They're not your customers. So you're forced to work with people.
Right. And we've all been there. We've all had the really difficult client and we have no choice.
But for you as an entrepreneur, you've got this freedom of decision.
There's certain things I don't put up with. There are people out there that are bullies. I will not abide a bully.
Pretty powerful, no doubt.
I just want to go back to something I talked about in like my history and making mistakes and stuff. But to any of the people out there that are considering entrepreneurship, which everyone should, is great. But do yourself a favor and learn on someone else's dime, because I made mistakes early on in my career that someone else had to pay for. You have to reprint the brochures, or you have to, you lose a client because you handled it badly or whatever it is. Do it on someone else's dime. And then when you've learned those lessons, or at least a good chunk of them, that's when you can consider, I think, hanging up your own shingle.
Terrific advice. So go take a job for 6 months in the field kind of thing, learn the ropes, and then strike out on your own.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes the things that you screw up, or maybe you don't screw them up, maybe you're just witnessing somebody else struggling. Those can be the most valuable lessons, right? And that's how we have to look at it.
Fantastic advice. Fantastic insights here. I can't thank you enough for sharing your time and your wisdom. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
It means a lot to me. And I so value you as a client, and even more so as a friend.
Well, listen, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I want to thank you very much, Rachel Ott, Varga Girl Design, for sharing your entrepreneurial journey and experiences with us. Before you go, though, if a listener wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I think the best way is email me at rachel@vargagirldesign.com.
And the website again?
vargagirldesign.com, VARGA, Girl Design.
Super. Well, thank you again, Rachel. And to our listeners, thank you for being here. And be sure to return next time for more insights from the unsure entrepreneur. That's it for now.
That's it for this episode of the Unsure Entrepreneur podcast. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss other candid conversations with small business owners. And be sure to check us out at unsureentrepreneur.com.